In 2025, Subway shut its doors on 729 more American stores. That's not a bad quarter. That's the 10th year in a row. Once, this was the biggest restaurant chain on earth. More locations than McDonald's. More locations than Starbucks. At its peak in 2015, Subway had over 27,000 stores in the US alone. Today, it's below 19,000 and still falling. The company just got bought for $9.6 billion by a private equity firm. And somehow, even as it keeps shrinking, its profits are exploding. So what's actually happening here, and is Subway dying, or just being harvested for what's left? In 1965, a 17-year-old named Fred DeLuca borrowed $1,000 from a family friend, a nuclear physicist named Peter Buck, to open a sandwich shop and help pay for college. They called it Pete's Super Submarines. It sold over 300 sandwiches on its first day. The shop struggled, so they opened another and another. By the middle of the 1970s, with growth stalling, DeLuca and Buck made the decision that would define the company forever. They started franchising. It worked almost too well. Startup costs were a fraction of what a McDonald's franchise demanded. Subway didn't need to buy land or build a kitchen from scratch. It just needed a lease, a counter, and a sign. By 1987, there were 1,000 stores. By the 2010s, there were tens of thousands, spread across nearly every strip mall, gas station, and downtown block in America. In parts of Canada, the density got almost absurd. Entire provinces ended up with roughly one Subway for every 10,000 residents, more concentrated than almost any fast food brand on the planet. But the model had a flaw baked into it from the very start. Subway made its money from royalties, a cut of every sale, no matter how that individual store was actually doing. So corporate had every incentive to keep opening new locations, even next door to existing ones. Franchisees begged the company not to approve a new store nearby. Weeks later, one would open anyway. The chain wasn't just growing, it was quietly cannibalizing itself, one royalty check at a time. Then came 2015, and everything that had been quietly cracking underneath the brand broke at once. Founder Fred DeLuca died of leukemia that same year, and control passed to his sister, Suzanne Greco, who had spent decades inside the company but had never run it alone. At almost the exact same moment, Subway's most famous spokesman, Jared Fogle, known for his dramatic weight loss story, was arrested on federal charges. The company's entire marketing identity collapsed almost overnight. Leadership was gone. The face of the brand was gone. And the stores kept opening anyway, because the machine that approved new franchises didn't stop just because the story around it had fallen apart. By 2019, Subway had done something it had never done in its history. It hired an outsider, John Chidsey, as CEO, a signal that the founding family's grip on the company was finally loosening. But the damage from years of oversaturation and thin margins wasn't something a new executive could fix quickly. From 2016 onward, Subway closed a net total of more than 8,300 restaurants across the United States. Not all at once. Quietly. A few hundred every single year, like a slow leak nobody wanted to patch. By 2021, the footprint had fallen to just over 21,000 stores, down more than a fifth from its peak. And that same year, under mounting pressure, Subway finally admitted something it had avoided saying for a decade. The food itself needed to change. In 2021, the company overhauled its ingredients. In 2022, it launched what it called the Subway Series, a simplified menu of a dozen signature sandwiches, ordered by name or number instead of assembled piece by piece. For a moment, it actually worked. North American same-store sales rose double digits, and executives started calling it a 9-quarter streak of growth. It looked briefly like a real turnaround, but the goodwill was fragile. That same year, Subway was fighting a lawsuit alleging its tuna wasn't actually tuna. A separate suit accused the chain of advertising sandwiches that showed twice as much steak as customers actually received in the bag. And to fix its reputation for freshness, Subway made a bigger promise. It would finally start slicing meat in store the way rivals like Jersey Mike's had been doing for years. That meant installing $6,000 automatic slicers in roughly 20,000 US restaurants at the company's expense. On paper, it was a peace offering to franchisees. In practice, many of them hated it. Owners complained about wasted meat from odd-end cuts, hours of extra labor, and no clear evidence the slicers actually moved sales. The chairman of the largest group representing Subway franchisees put it bluntly: nobody was calling it the greatest thing since sliced bread or since sliced meat. Around the same time, a separate group of franchisees went public with complaints about high franchise fees, a sign that the relationship between corporate and the people who actually run the stores was fraying, right as the company was preparing to sell itself. By the end of 2023, the chain had fallen to just over 20,000 USA stores, its lowest total in nearly 2 decades. And that's exactly when Roark Capital, the private equity firm already behind Arby's, Dunkin', and Jimmy John's, stepped in with a $9.6 billion offer, the third largest restaurant acquisition ever recorded. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable. Roark didn't pay for Subway the way a company buys a factory or a fleet of trucks. It used something called whole business securitization, essentially borrowing against Subway's own future royalty payments and packaging that debt into bonds sold to investors. It's a technique Roark has used again and again across its portfolio because it lets a private equity firm buy a company largely with the company's own future income. By the end of 2025, Subway was carrying roughly $5.7 billion in new debt it never had before. And yet, in that same stretch of time, Subway's net income more than tripled, climbing to $688 million. How does a shrinking chain make more money? Part of the answer is vendor rebates, fees paid by the suppliers who sell ingredients and equipment to franchisees, a revenue stream that has almost nothing to do with how many sandwiches actually get sold that day. In other words, the parent company can keep getting richer even while individual stores, and the people who mortgage their savings to own them, keep struggling. To its credit, Subway isn't standing still. It's rolled out a value menu with items under $5, trying to compete with McDonald's and other chains chasing price-conscious customers. It opened more than 1,000 new stores internationally in a single year, with agreements in place for thousands more. And executives insist the closures aren't a collapse. They're what the company calls right-sizing. Fewer stores, better locations, stronger unit economics going forward. But the numbers tell a harder truth. The average Subway location still generates around $500,000 a year in sales. Jersey Mike's, the chain Subway is still chasing on something as basic as freshly sliced meat, generates nearly 3 times that per store, and it's been adding hundreds of new locations a year while Subway keeps closing them. Jimmy John's, another Roark-owned brand competing for the exact same customer, does about double Subway's volume too. Subway isn't just smaller than it used to be. Store for store, it's still weaker than the competitors eating its lunch. That's the real inheritance Roark bought. Not a broken company, and not a thriving one either, but a brand with enormous scale and a business model built decades ago around a simple, seductive idea. That more locations always meant more money, regardless of whether any single one of them was actually healthy. For 50 years, that idea was treated as gospel. It's only now, with the store count shrinking for the 10th straight year, that the industry is willing to say it out loud. And Subway isn't alone in learning this lesson the hard way. Roark's other brands, Arby's, Dunkin', Jimmy John's, have all faced their own versions of the same tension. A corporate parent optimized for royalties and rebates, sitting on top of thousands of individual owners who need actual foot traffic to survive. What makes Subway's case so stark is the scale of the gap. Nowhere else in fast food is the distance between headline profit and store-level health quite this wide, or quite this visible in the closures piling up year after year. Subway didn't fail because people stopped eating sandwiches. It's struggling because for 50 years, it built its empire on a simple promise. More was always better. More stores, more royalties, more locations crammed onto the same block. That promise worked, right up until the moment it didn't. The chain isn't dead. It's still the largest restaurant company in America by store count. But it's no longer growing into strength. It's being managed for whatever value is left to squeeze out. For the franchisees still standing behind the counter, that distinction matters more than any number on a balance sheet. They're the ones absorbing the cost of every slicer, every closure, every debt-fueled acquisition made in a boardroom they never sat in. The sign above the door still says Subway, but the business underneath it has quietly become something else, a machine built less to sell sandwiches than to extract value from the thousands of people who still believe in the sign. And that's a very different kind of story than the one Subway used to tell about itself.